Good afternoon and welcome to today's local government education program provided by the University of Illinois Extension. My name is Nancy Woodralgo, Specialist in Community and Economic Development for Illinois Extension. Today's webinar is about the Connect Illinois Grant Program for Broadband Infrastructure. It's presented by Matt Schmidt, Deputy Director for Broadband within the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. Matt administers the state's Office of Broadband and the Connect Illinois Grant Program, which is right now the country's largest competitive matching grant program. Connect Illinois seeks to extend critical high-speed internet access to homes, businesses, and community anchor institutions throughout the state. As you know, the Illinois Office of Broadband recently opened the application window for the first $50 million in funding. So Matt is here to help you understand the Connect Illinois program and the current funding round. Prior to this role at the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, Matt engaged public policy from various perspectives and wearing different hats as a state legislator, leading on such issues as infrastructure and economic competitiveness. In office, Matt led the push for ubiquitous broadband access throughout the creation of Minnesota's Office of Broadband Development and related to the Border Broadband Grant Program. Throughout his career, Matt has enjoyed consulting, collaboration, and research, primarily in the areas of technology deployment, infrastructure investment, and economic development. So given his background, you should engage with Matt as you build your file for the grant program. If you haven't already done so, you'll want to go to the previous recording we made of the Connect Illinois Broadband Infrastructure Grant Program that's available on the local government education website, and that is at go.illinois.edu/LGE. So Matt's going to discuss today the application packet for Connect Illinois, and that outlines the required application content and provides the instructions and templates designed to facilitate the application process. So this webinar is going to discuss that application packet and how you should be incorporating it into your proposal. This webinar recording is also going to be made available on our website and YouTube channel, and all registered participants are going to receive the packet, links to resources, and a link to this recording. If you do not have those materials, you can contact me at essery@illinois.edu. At this time, I will turn it over to Matt Schmidt. Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot, Nancy. Really appreciate the chance to join you again today, and thanks so much for your help in organizing this webinar series. So this is the second in a series of at least 3 webinars that we're holding during the open application window for the first round of Connect Illinois funding. During our first webinar, we talked a lot about the historic investment that Illinois is making in its Connect Illinois Broadband Grant Program. We have $400 million available for competitive matching grants. In this first round that is open right now, accepting applications through April 3rd, 2020, we have up to $50 million available. And so last webinar, we talked a lot about the overarching structure and the notice of funding opportunity inherent to this first round of funding. Today, we're going to get into a little bit more of the supporting materials and the actual application itself. And so we have the application packet that is in front of you today. It's posted on our Connect Illinois website. And folks will want to get familiar with this document. It's intended to help applicants and other stakeholders understand the process for applying for funding and make sure that you get all the required materials into us in a timely fashion. And so there's a lot of pages to this document, but the whole idea here is to help you better understand this opportunity, how to put together an application, make sure that you're not missing required aspects of that application. And so you'll see at the top here, we've got Connect Illinois Broadband Grant Application Packet. That's the way it's referred to online at the Notice of Funding Opportunity links. It's also version 2.0 of this document. And so there's a chance that we may tweak it along the way, but we will certainly make note of which version this is. We made some very small adjustments from version 1.0 to version 2.0. We don't anticipate having a third version, but it's possible. And so just make sure that you check back at the Connect Illinois website to make sure that you're reading off of the current version. And the reason that we are updating it is just to make it as user-friendly and clear as possible to potential applicants. So that's something that I'll stress. The Illinois Office of Broadband, we're really interested in making sure that folks have a good experience engaging us and also applying for funding. And so if there's any feedback from folks along the way, the best way to reach us is at broadband@illinois.gov. It's kind of the one-stop shop for all things broadband as it relates to contacting our office. So broadband@illinois.gov. So moving forward here, the document that's in front of you gives a little checklist of the kind of information that is required in an application. And so we have the separate Notice of Funding Opportunity document that is posted alongside this on the Connect Illinois website. This document will include several appendices in the following pages. Also, in addition to this document, we have a uniform application that is required of similar grant programs and grant applicants in Illinois. That link is included on our Connect Illinois website. Likewise for a uniform budget document. And then applicants should not overlook a couple of additional requirements, a conflict of interest statement, and likewise a mandatory disclosure form. And finally, we have a W-9 requirement. And at the bottom of the page, you'll see a couple of reminders just regarding the need for applicants to register at sam.gov. And likewise, if you're not already pre-qualified, pre-registered through the GATA portal, the Grant Accountability and Transparency Act, GATA, visit that website and just give us an email at that broadband@illinois.gov email address if you have any questions about your current status. We want to make sure that all applicants are GATA pre-qualified. If they're not, they won't be eligible for funding. And so we also have mention of 2 risk assessments at the bottom here. And so this first page, just a summary of the items that an applicant needs to address in order to be eligible for funding. And so pay attention to this first page. So moving forward, we get into the first of several appendices, Appendix A. This is our grant application cover sheet template. It's a mouthful, but it's designed to help our Office of Broadband administer the applications that come to us. And also in one page, well, actually it's 2, identify the critical information inherent to a particular application. And so the first thing that we're asking for is applicants to identify as a broadband access, broadband innovation, or urban broadband project. At the top here, you can see there's 3 options. Likewise, as we move down, I'm not going to run through everything on every page, but this first page, it's important. The project name, this information is also available in the uniform application. So you can see in the blue text that follows each line, it's essentially a reference to where this information is also requested in a full application. And so my advice to applicants is to ignore this front page until the end. And then once you have your full application together, you can fill this out. It's a template after all. And we've given you helpful clues as to where you can find this information in your full application. And so as you run down the list, again, I'm not going to go through everything here, but it's important that we have a primary contact for the applicant in the application. We want information regarding the project location, specifically a list of counties that are served by the project or would be served by the project. Likewise for the grant requested amount, and you can round to the nearest dollar, folks. And then the matching dollars that are provided. Again, that's really important information for us. This is, after all, a matching grant program. And then the total project costs. And so this is information that is found elsewhere in the application. Put this page together at the end of the process before you submit, and it's going to help us understand what you're talking about and what you're proposing without having to thumb through the whole document every time we're looking for a piece of vital information. Rounding out this first page, we want to know about funding commitments by partners, and you can see there's an opportunity here for listing project partners. And then finally, the number of passings that the application proposes to include. So those are passings to homes, businesses, community anchor institutions. We also specify farms, because we want to know how many farms are going to be connected to this investment. You can see on the next page, so this is page 3, we have a table that we provide for applicants to share with us the number of households, businesses, farms, community institutions that will be served either in currently unserved areas, those areas that fall below the 25/3 threshold, or in currently underserved areas, and those are areas between 25/3 and 100/20 service. And so we just want a count of the number of passings or locations, if you will, that an application will include. And then also on this page, we'd like to know if an application is including last mile components, middle mile components, or both last mile and middle mile. And so we have definitions for these terms in our Notice of Funding Opportunity and also on our Connect Illinois website. We've tried not to be too redundant in the information that we're sharing here. And so if you need a definition, those are the places to look. And then also we want some more information from applicants on the type of broadband connections and construction that's being proposed with a list of examples below here. And so now moving on to Appendix B, the executive summary. This is a really important part of the application because it helps us get a sense of the story that you're telling early on in our reading of each application. And so we have to hold you to 2 pages. We understand that a lot of applicants could go on with all the great things that an individual proposal offers, but we want to get a good sense as to what your vision for this project entails. And so you can see we've have a bullet list here below in terms of the sorts of things that we're looking for. You don't have to stick to this verbatim, but you do have to keep it under 2 pages. And we want each one of these bullets included. So a summary statement on the project, put it front and center so that we get a good sense of what you're talking about right away. A narrative where you're talking about the geography and the location of the project, including the number of passings and the speed improvements that you're anticipating in this project. Likewise, we want to know more about the applicant and your past experience in broadband technology deployment and in related work. We want to know how you can sustain and manage this project moving forward. And it goes on and on. We talk about some important information here that we think is really integral to understanding what you're proposing. And so the next bullet gets into the quality of life and economic development that is tied to this investment. And then also following a description of why this project should be awarded state broadband infrastructure grant funding. And so this is your chance to make your case in very clear terms to us, what you're proposing, why it's important, and why you think you should be able to leverage some Connect Illinois grant funding. And so moving on here on page 4, we've got Appendix C. This includes key project data, and this is more of instructions moving forward here. It's not a template necessarily that you have to follow verbatim, but we think that if applications use this approach to organize the information that they're sharing in their application, it'll be helpful both for the applicant and for those of us at the Office of Broadband who will be reading all these applications and scoring them. If there's a basic template and approach from one application to the next, it'll really help us understand what's being proposed and help us verify everything that is required is in the application. I think the same holds true for applicants too. We don't want you to miss anything. So if you stick as closely as possible to the way we've laid out the template itself or the instructions, I think it'll be helpful for all of us involved. And so I'm not going to run through all of these to go on and on here, but I think it's really important that you spend time in this portion of an application talking about the mapping and the description of the project area. Of course, we have to reconcile the area that an applicant hopes to serve with the eligibility map that's posted on our Connect Illinois website. And so that is an interactive map. It's not perfect. We talked about that. The data is flawed. The mapping is to be considered the start of the conversation and not the final word. And so if you look at that mapping that is accessible through our Connect Illinois website and something doesn't make sense to you, you think it maybe overstates the service available in a part of the state, let's start that conversation sooner rather than later. And we can talk about areas where the mapping is inaccurate. And I guess this is a good opportunity for us to plug one of the efforts that the Illinois Office of Broadband is conducting right now. We're looking to identify a private vendor to help us work with broadband providers around the state and others in putting together a fully interactive map that provides crowdsourced data, also provider offer data that gives us as best an understanding of where broadband is and where it isn't. That map is not available for round 1, and we hope to have that available later this year and certainly moving into the second and subsequent funding rounds of our program. So in the meantime, the mapping that is posted on the Connect Illinois website is the best that we've got to start the conversation about where broadband is, where it isn't, and how we hope to target the resources in the Connect Illinois Fund. And so there, I got that out, the mapping plug. It's really important that we start that conversation sooner rather than later in terms of inaccuracies in the mapping. And so in item 1.2, we talk about applicant eligibility. We've had some questions about this, and we try to strive for applicant inclusivity. I think the overarching theme here is we want to make sure that applicants or partnerships that are formed can demonstrate that they've got the chops to do this work, that they've done it in the past, that you've got folks who can both manage a grant and also who can deploy broadband accordingly. And so when you look at our notice of funding opportunity and the document in front of you here, the eligible applicants for this program: incorporated businesses or partnerships, political subdivisions, which we later define as any county, city, village, town, special district, or political subdivision or public corporation. Also, we have Illinois nonprofit organizations that can include hospitals, clinics, higher education institutions. Likewise, we have Illinois cooperative associations. So we have a lot of rural co-ops that have done a lot of really good work with various service offerings. And also Illinois LLCs organized for the purpose of expanding broadband access. And so we consider this to be a fairly inclusive list of eligible applicants. If there are any questions about how you might put forward an application, how you would organize a partnership, reach out to us and let's have a conversation about that. We certainly want to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward in terms of how you organize your partnership and apply for funding. And so we have item 1.3 here. We want to know about county or townships that are proposed in the project area. We asked for this on that cover sheet, but we want a little bit more in-depth treatment of it here. Likewise, we're looking for a single paragraph that summarizes and offers a description of the project. This is a paragraph that we could use on our website, and also we will use when describing successfully awarded grant applications and others. And so as you move to page 5, you can see a template, a sample, so to speak here, of what that summary paragraph might look like. I know this looks like more than a paragraph, but what we're asking for here is the applicant name. We want the name of the individual submitting this, and also as you look at this, we are scrolling down. We want a one-paragraph summary of what is being proposed here. And so this is just an example, but we'd recommend that you identify if you're a broadband access, broadband innovation, or urban broadband project. It's middle mile or a combination of middle mile and last mile. And then what you expect in terms of service levels and numbers of households, businesses, community anchor institutions, or farms that are connected. And so in this one paragraph here, give us as accurate a summary of what you're proposing as possible. And then if there is a significant economic development or community impact rationale or element to the proposal, you can offer a second paragraph in here as well. And so we'd like two separate paragraphs, the one that summarizes the project itself and the other that offers a little bit more information about the economic development or community impact potential of project. And then finally, the total eligible project costs, how much of that total cost the applicant is putting forward in terms of a match, and then finally, the amount of state grant dollars that are being requested. And so this is a really important piece of this application process. We want to be able to reuse this information for successfully, awarded grant programs and projects, I should say. And so please take some time and get that as accurate as you can. And so moving on to Appendix D, anticipated broadband impact instructions. During our last webinar, we talked a lot about how scoring in this part of the application would take place. So we've got 60 of our 200 available points tied to anticipated broadband impacts. And so make sure that you follow not the instructions, but the information that's provided in the NOFO on this section. But also as you look at Appendix D in front of you, this is a suggestion on how you might organize this portion of your application. And so again, we want you to identify broadband access, broadband innovation, urban broadband in this section as well, and then get into describing the anticipated broadband impact. On the following page, we have a familiar table, anticipated total passings. Again, it reconciles the number of households, businesses, farms, or community anchor institutions that will be served as part of this proposal against the increase in service level. And so if you're starting from an area with no service and going up to 25 by 3, for instance, we'd like to know how many passes will be included in the project. Likewise, as you move your way down, if you go from 0 service to 100 by 20, how many passes? If you've got areas that might already have some service and you're improving from 25 by 3 to 100 by 20, for instance, we'd like a tally of those anticipated passings as well. And so this is just in one table a way that we can understand what you anticipate in terms of the broadband impact. And so we also would like some documentation as requested here in 2.3 regarding unserved and underserved areas. And I'm not going to reread this if there are any questions regarding this, but it's important that folks look at the interactive wireline broadband map, referred to here as the grant eligibility map. They're one and the same. The map that is linked to on our Connect Illinois website, that will be helpful in getting the conversation, helping folks to understand what is needed here and where the areas of eligibility are. All right, as we move forward here, getting to jump ahead, we want you to list businesses in the proposed project area that will benefit from the broadband project. To the extent possible, we'd like you to identify specific businesses where you can and flesh out the potential economic development of the project in this section. Moving forward, the same holds true for a list of farms and agricultural use customers, community anchor institutions, education locations, and also the extent to which the deployment or the investment will have positive health or public safety benefits or connect locations tied to health or public safety. We want to know about that. And then also, is the proposed project providing broadband improvement to an economically distressed area? Appendix E, another aspect of our scoring. This is the non-state matching requirement. Again, this is a competitive matching grant fund program, and so we seek in this round to leverage at least $1 in non-state funding to pair with every dollar of Connect Illinois investment, and that's the way we turn a $400 million investment in Connect Illinois into something that's much, much greater than the original state investment. And so it's really important that we're leveraging non-state dollars, and you can see in items 3.1 through 3.3 here, we're asking for some specific information regarding how much that share non-state match will be, and also where it's coming from, if you have commitments from other project partners, for instance. And so this is an important aspect of the application. There are points available depending upon the extent to which an application includes 55% or more of total project costs in the form of a non-state match. In our table that we have before us on the top of page 8 here is one way that you can share that information with us. In fact, we really encourage you to use the exact tables that we include in this application packet, just so as we look through the applications, things are organized consistently from one application to the next. It's going to help us with clarity and understanding what you're proposing. And so moving forward, we want complete contact information for each application funding partner that's identified above. And then also, it's important that we hear of community support for the project, and that can come in different forms, and we'll revisit this later. But if a community is providing local matching funding, that clearly is testament to a community's support for a project. And so in this section and elsewhere in the application, we want to make sure that that is made clear to us. And then moving forward to Appendix F, project readiness. This is a really important aspect of any proposal. We want to make sure that we are not only partnering with applicants and applicant partners that are ready to do this work, but that they're really up to work and doing really good work as a result. And so what we're asking for here, we break this down into a couple of different subsections. The project budget. We're looking to get an understanding of the sources and uses of the grant funds. First of all, we're asking for you to confirm the total eligible project costs. If there are any questions about what is eligible, what is not, please let our office know. I should just mention here, and I've mentioned this in our prior webinar, that the early funding rounds of Connect Illinois are coming from bond proceeds. And so it has to be long-term infrastructure that we're investing into capital investment. And so there may be some elements of applications down the road, for instance, proposal and project planning, that might be included in future funding rounds, but those are not eligible costs at this time. And so that's just something, a point worth repeating where we can. So we want a list of schedule of all the grant eligible elements that will be purchased or utilized for the project. We have a couple of notes here, so make sure you don't skim over those. Also, we want to know if additional costs related to this proposed project that are not eligible costs will be incurred in order to deploy broadband to this area. And so again, we want some specificity around those potential costs as well. The next subsection here, project broadband infrastructure. We need to have a good sense of the engineering designs, the diagrams, the maps that demonstrate the viability of the proposed project. If you're attaching this information, please label it as Appendix 4.4. The reason we're asking for it to be labeled accordingly is because it correlates with Section 4.4 of the instructions. And so ideally, applications will come to us and they will be organized not only in the order the information is requested in this document, but also might be labeled accordingly. And so it'll help us know what is being offered at what point in an application so that we have a firm sense of what we're dealing with. And so again, as this material is attached, please label it accordingly. In this case, Appendix 4.4. And so this piece here is worth clarifying. We did offer some clarification between version 1.0 and version 2.0 of the application packet. So on 4.4, it reads, the design documents must clearly document the applicant's comprehensive understanding of the project requirements. To be fully competitive in this category, that means to score more points than not, information should be certified by a registered professional engineer. A certification by a registered professional engineer is required before any grant funding will be issued. And so ideally, that review by a certified professional engineer or registered professional engineer will be included in an application on the front end. We know we have an accelerated timeline right now, and so we will extend it if folks need a little bit more time, but we really hope that folks strive to include that on the front end and not simply by the time at which a grant will be issued. If you need additional clarity, please let us know. 4.5, we just want to make sure that installed broadband infrastructure is scalable to the speeds of at least 100 megabits per second symmetrical service. It doesn't mean that has to be offered up front, but it has to be scalable to those speeds. And that really gets at the value that we have with this investment. We want it to stand the test of time. And so in order to demonstrate that, we need to hear from a manufacturer of the equipment or a registered professional engineer. As we move forward here, we're looking for identification of the type of broadband construction that's proposed for the project, whether this application is last mile, middle mile, a combination of the two. In this case, we are emphasizing the last mile aspects of providing service to end users. And so that's worth emphasis here. And then finally, 4.8, the proposed project is middle mile broadband facilities project or includes a middle mile facilities component. Please describe why that new construction is necessary. And so if you're not making direct connections with this investment to end users, this is your opportunity to explain why not. At the top of page 10 here, this is a good reminder that the prevailing wage laws will apply to all proposed projects. We can spend some time on this in a future webinar where we look at some specific requirements of prevailing wage law. And so if there are any questions from applicants or others, please let us know. We'd be happy to spend some time with a subject content expert on prevailing wage if that would be helpful for folks. All right, moving forward to the next subsection here, we've got the project pre-construction permits and approvals. I'm not going to run through all of these, but this is really important. Likewise, with project implementation, we have some specific requirements here. And moving on to the project schedule, we want to get a good sense as to how an applicant plans to deploy resources and extend their networks provided Connect Illinois funding. And so this is the table that we'd like you to use, or one very similar to this. All work needs to be completed by this June 2023 deadline within approximately 3 years of funding. And so that's worth reiterating here. I think we're very eager to see these dollars go to great projects and those projects to get underway, as soon as practicable. So we look at project financials at the top of page 12, and we have we're looking for a 5-year standalone financial plan for the proposed project. Moving on to 419, describe why the project would not be feasible without the award. A lot of these sorts of state grant programs and similar investment in broadband gets at a basic challenge we have with providing broadband to difficult to serve areas, whether it's population sparsity or geography. We want to hear about that in this section. And then also in 4.20 is the applicant leveraging all funding sources that may apply to the proposed project area. And so there are a lot of opportunities outside of Connect Illinois. We want to make sure that you're doing what you can to leverage those opportunities where they exist. Moving to Appendix G, this is just as important as project readiness. This is project sustainability. The point allotment that is attached to this section certainly confirms that. And so what we're looking for here is a technical expertise statement talking about your background as an applicant, who would be doing this work, and in demonstrating their chops, so to speak, that this is a potential partner for the state that can get the job done. Likewise, we are looking for more information under 5.2 regarding the organizational support. And so we want to know specifically key officers, management personnel with brief resumes that can be included. And again, if you're including additional information, please label it accordingly. Appendix 5.1 in that case, Appendix 5.2 in the latter. Likewise, we want audited financial statements. It's really important that we have strong financials from applicants. So please provide that information under Appendix 5.3. If there are any issues that potential applicants have with any of these requirements, please reach out to us at broadband@illinois.gov. We'll try to provide some clarity if need be, or work with you on how to provide a compelling and complete application. And so Appendix H, broadband adoption assistance instructions. As we had mentioned last week in discussion of the notice of funding opportunity, this is an infrastructure grant program, but we also want to take advantage of opportunities for helping individuals adopt and subscribe to service and utilize this infrastructure and service that we're investing in. And so for providers or applicants that have programs available, please mention those in your application. This is your chance to speak to this issue. We also want to emphasize that we're not trying to create false incentives here. And so if an applicant just doesn't do this kind of work, please don't make it up just to score points. We want meaningful adoption assistance and work in this area. And so if it's something that you're up to, or if you have a project partner that you can bring on board to help you with this, great. Please don't feel obligated to make something up that's not legitimate or of high value. We understand that not all applicants are going to be able to do the kind of adoption assistance that others might. And so that's just worth emphasizing here. But it's valuable stuff, and where we can promote it, we want to. And so that's why you see it under Appendix H. Appendix I, we have open access and shared use. Again, this is something that we'd like to promote. We're creating incentives by putting some points behind this. I think in an ideal world, we will collaborate over infrastructure where we can and focus on extending critical networks to the folks who need them throughout the state. And so that's what we'd like to try to do here, where we can, is focusing on last mile, collaborating over middle mile. That's not always practicable, but where it is, we'd like to see more of it. And so there's a couple of different examples of how this can take place. Certainly, you can look at the public infrastructure that's available to connect. The Illinois Century Network is one example. Over 2,000 miles of fiber around the state of Illinois. We've got opportunities for partnership with various public agencies and offering service or extending networks off of existing infrastructure. Likewise, proposals could include multiple providers, likewise for multiple technology. And I think one example that might be worth looking at is how we might be able to pair wireline and wireless or cellular service expansion in parts of Illinois through partnership among one or more providers offering different technologies. And so I would love to see some applications that propose that. I think it's a really interesting and innovative way of extending broadband and choice in parts of Illinois that lack it. And then it's not required, but the extent to which you can formalize the arrangements and the agreements through a memorandum of understanding would be helpful, certainly garner you more points in this area, something to strive for if you've got some good ideas and you're at that point where you're able to put an MOU together. All right, so in Appendix J, we have an applicant affidavit instruction, and this provides for instance, local government to provide support for a project. And so we didn't want to see applicants having to make this stuff up, so we've provided some templates that you can use as you're garnering support. And so you see one offered here. You certainly can change this as you deem fit, but this is just something that, that you can use. We're offering it here as a resource so that you've got something to build off of. And again, we don't want to create incentive for a paper chase, but I think it's really important that key community partners and others that are integral to the success of a broadband deployment project, you know, are aware of what's being proposed, have a voice in it, and the extent to which there is a vision for broadband for a given community, that's reflected in an application. And so there's different ways of doing that, but a resolution of support is certainly one. And here's a continuation of that sample. And this brings us to Appendix K here, the grant application pro forma template. I'm not going to run through this, but we just wanted to offer an example for applicants to consider as you're putting your applications together. And so that rounds out, on this next page here, the information that's contained in our application packet. And again, the application packet is one of several links available on our Connect Illinois website under the Notice of Funding tab that is along the right vertical column on the Connect Illinois webpage. And so if folks have any questions about accessing this information or additional questions tied to this presentation here today, please offer them if you haven't already. We will be putting together some additional webinars, at least one more taking place on the 28th. And we want to make sure that we're giving applicants as much information as possible to better understand the Connect Illinois grant program and this historic opportunity for broadband expansion throughout our state, and also understand the process that the Illinois Office of Broadband will be undertaking. We want to make this as open and transparent and user-friendly as possible, and we hope folks bear with us. This is the first time that we're going down this path with this program and with our office. So please don't hesitate to provide any feedback or ask any questions along the way. And so with that, keep your questions coming. And Nancy, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks so much, Matt. Well, that was very important to be able to take the time to go through the application packet. I think it's going to be very useful for the prospective applicants and participants of this, this particular webinar and the webinars that we're holding in regards to the Connect Illinois Broadband Grant Program. Really want to thank you for that. I want to let participants and viewers know that they can post questions if you're listening to this during our designated broadcast period of time, then post those questions to the chat space as they come to mind, as well as if you are listening to this recording after the fact, then there should be a way, a form that you can use to submit, as well as you have the presenter's contact information as well. And so we have, these webinars online. We have communications that we're doing in partnership between Extension and the DCEO to assist you and make sure that you have access to continue to ask questions and get assistance through these different documents and recordings that we're providing. Matt, I did think of a few questions that I thought might be useful for you to address during the remaining couple of minutes of this webinar recording. You had mentioned about the broadband adoption assistance programs, and I see that in the section of the frequently asked questions document, there's a projected financial and non-state match question that has to do with the fact that while the grant program is primarily supposed to support infrastructure costs, such as costs related to obtaining construction permits, the purchase and or construction of facilities, and the installation and testing of equipment used to provide broadband service. I just also wanted to ask after the portion that includes facilities that bring the service to the home. And does the broadband adoption assistance programs that you're talking about in the application packet section there, does that encompass that part of the facilities bringing the service to the home at all, or is this a completely separate and additional assistance program?
So that's a great question, Nancy. You're really paying attention here. This is great. And I think that's a question that's probably on the minds of a lot of potential applicants. You know, as I had mentioned during our last webinar, what we're trying to achieve here is multifold. I mean, on the one hand, we are trying to have broadband ubiquity to homes, businesses, community anchor institutions in every corner of the state. And so that means extending access to those locations and making sure that no one or nowhere is left behind. At the same time, we want to take advantage of opportunities in economic development and also help advance really important applications in telehealth or distance learning or precision agriculture, for instance. And so when you look at putting an application together, we have to start from, I guess, square one. This is a program, at least in the early stages, that will be leveraging capital funding. That's bondable expenses are those that qualify for funding. And so as an applicant puts together a proposal, there's the match component that can exceed that 50-50% threshold. And so for portions of a project that exceed that 50% threshold, there's an opportunity to do more work in telehealth or economic development or distance learning. And so that's how I would advise applicants to think of some of that work, is not relying upon it being the straight up 50-50 match, but something that is integral to the narrative, integral to the proposal, but that is captured, at least from an accounting standpoint, as we're looking at the expenses and where they stack up in non-state match that exceeds that 50% threshold. And so if there's additional questions on how that might look, happy to stand for follow-up questions, or feel free to provide an email at broadband@illinois.gov. But I think that that's the best way of incorporating some of that work. It doesn't necessarily need to be the only way, but I think when you look at some of the requirements we have regarding the source of the Connect Illinois funding, that it's bondable expenses that are eligible for funding, we really do need to be focusing on infrastructure, durable equipment, longer term things that we're investing in. And so that's why I really emphasize putting some of this additional and really important work that supplements the infrastructure investment into the non-state match that exceeds that 50% threshold. And so hopefully that's clarifying for folks. I'm sure questions will come to us if it's not, and we'll revisit it either in our FAQ document or at a future webinar. And Nancy, I should just mention, I failed to do it at the end of my remarks here today. I did it during our last webinar, but just a disclaimer that for folks who are interested in the firm policy of Connect Illinois, that is articulated in our NOFO document, the Notice of Funding Opportunity, as well as in this application packet, and in our frequently asked question document, the FAQ, that is posted on our Connect Illinois website. And so the webinars themselves are used to help better understand, how we're thinking about this program in the Connect Illinois investment. But please refer to the documents I just mentioned for the formal policy and the final word on answers to questions, for instance. And so that's why we really want to make that FAQ document as inclusive and thorough as possible. I think we've already got around 40 questions on there, and I'm sure as folks listen in on this webinar down the road, the number of questions addressed in that FAQ document will only grow. And so that's really the resource to go to for final word on specific questions. So there's my disclaimer. Thank you.
Thank you. That's really important because I see that the FAQ document is only growing, and there's a lot of questions that when you have to go to the extent to answer those questions, you only create more questions, right? And so I saw another question, and then I probably won't ask anymore, but there's a question here about if the bonding, can bonds be used to fund match, a non-state match? And you do a really good job of answering that question. And then at the end, the answer mentions that should the match also include debt, and this would be debt taken on by a local government or municipality, that the application reviewers would also be looking for evidence that the business model adequately account for the repayment of the debt. So would applicants then just need to submit their annual financial reports along with the application, or is there something specific that you would just need to be able to see or have reiterated from financial reports to show that?
Sure, another great question, and this is more of a very specific question. I think the answer to the general question here is that we're looking to leverage non-state match in various forms. There's a lot of federal funding that's available for applications and applicants to leverage, but also we see this in states around the country where local match could be generated through a local bond, for instance, could be leveraged for non-state match. And so we certainly need to know that that's legitimate and that we have a conversation with an applicant that includes that. And so we've got some pieces in place already for that information to be shared. If there are any questions about how to share specifics regarding to the issuance of debt for a non-state match, let us know. If we get some more questions seeking clarity on that, we'll make sure that we update our FAQ document accordingly and may give this some treatment in a future webinar if there is an example of that.
Thanks so much. It sounds like there's a lot of potential for non-state match in different forms for communities, such as USDA grants and loans. Would that be one?
Yeah, we have, and it's interesting, the applicants will know this very well, that there are a number of funding opportunities available right now with Connect Illinois and USDA's Reconnect program. We also have at the federal level the Rural Digital Opportunities Fund, RDOF, that's being administered through the FCC, and that's a reverse auction format. And so there's some questions being posed about RDOF right now, and so I'm not going to comment on that now because what I say could be obsolete in a matter of weeks, but we'll make sure that we keep our FAQ document updated regarding developments with the FCC's RDOF program. But the point is, we really want to help applicants leverage those non-state dollars. And even if you're not applying for Connect Illinois funding, we encourage you to seek funding opportunities at the federal level or locally, and always consider the Illinois Office of Broadband to be a resource for applicants seeking those dollars as well as ours.
Okay, I'm going to bother you with one more question.
No, this is great.
At the end of the FAQ document, or at least right now, towards the end there, you mentioned that smaller projects could take one construction season, while larger projects would require 2 full construction seasons, etc. And I see your template also allows for applicants to sort of build out their project as much as they need to. So I guess this sort of just leads to the question about, as you're receiving applications, will there be a way for applicants who may not be successful during the first round to get feedback to submit to future rounds, especially as they're looking to implement larger projects?
Yeah. some good points here to emphasize. First of all, we want to provide feedback for applicants that did not get funding in the first round. And so we expect, we hope that there's going to be a lot of interest in this grant program, particularly in the first round. We hope to follow up with a second round sooner rather than later, so that that work of applicants that don't receive funding in this first round can be applied in short order for future funding. So we want to provide feedback in the interim, and so I would just say stay tuned for that opportunity after the funding round closes, and we have a chance to look at applications that are responsive to this funding opportunity and score them accordingly. And then moving beyond that, I would really encourage applicants to share with us in their applications their broader vision for a particular service area, or if there's a multi-phased approach to a broader deployment vision that an application only speaks to part of, for instance. And so I think it's really important for us to understand that, look, I mean, this is already, moving into the construction season here in 2020, when this application window closes, and decisions will be made as quickly and as responsibly as possible. But we understand that this work is going to extend into 2021 and for larger projects into years thereafter. And so we know it's very likely to be a multi-year deployment for a number of projects. So we want that to be shared with us in the application itself. And then also, I would just repeat, for those applicants that are proposing something in this first funding round that's part of a much bigger vision that might require additional funding down the road, whether it's through Connect Illinois or elsewhere, please speak to that in your application, because we want to have a good understanding of what your broader vision is and how this fits in with that.
Thank you so much. I'm going to give some closing comments now, and I just wanted to ask you before I do so if you have anything else you'd like to add.
I would just again encourage folks to contact us at broadband@illinois.gov if there are any questions. We've been getting a lot of inquiries from folks who participated in our last webinar, and we're trying to give good answers as quickly as possible. So bear with us if you haven't heard back from us yet, and please keep those inquiries coming, because we really want to be as helpful as possible to potential applicants. And I think that's the point that I would leave with you. We're kind of creating something from nothing here with this first round of funding, and so it's a learning exercise for all of us. But one of the I guess the overarching goals is to make this as user friendly as possible, and to that end, we welcome feedback at every step of the way. And so, thank you very much, Nancy, for helping us get the word out through this webinar series.
Thank you. Thank you for all you're doing. It sounds like the program is trying to be flexible enough for success in the future, and I really appreciate it. I'm sure a lot of the communities across the state appreciate that as well. I want to thank participants and viewers for viewing the webinars, participating in the webinars around this topic and other topics. I want to remind everybody that we have a third portion of this topic that we're going to present. Matt's going to come back and present on February 28th at 2 p.m. Central Time. That's a Friday, so next Friday. And so he's going to talk to the program eligibility maps and probably also address some other issues and questions that applicants have as the process is ongoing for this application period. So that's going to include the opportunity for applicants and other stakeholders to challenge the accuracy of program eligibility maps. And Matt had mentioned that a little bit today, but he's going to really delve into that for this third portion webinar next Friday. He's going to be able to speak to how incumbent providers can offer additional information regarding future deployment plans as well. And the webinar will discuss how this challenge process is intended to work. So thanks again for participating, and have a great week, and we hope to see you back next week. And if you're listening to this at a later date, hopefully that you will continue on to that third webinar recording. Thanks again for participating in Illinois Extension programs.